Thanks for the backstory. Let's get to that. This is a culmination of your professional career. Obviously, the pandemic really sped this book up. It's called Mind the Science, Saving Your Mental Health from Wellness Industry. And I found that tagline after the title specifically very interesting because we live in a time where pseudoscience is a big deal. And depending on how you wrap up misinformation, pseudoscience, depending on what doctor you've paid enough or naturopath you've paid enough to say something, I mean, there is information out there that gets wrapped up and looks like it came from a peer-reviewed study, and you can trust it. And I think that this is one of the things that I really want to kind of start with because it really leans into the book. We'll get into the trolling. We'll get into the experts versus idiots. We'll get into how you battle that personally and professionally. But I want to start with the book. What made you write the book? Was it COVID? Were you always interested in trying to explain the difference between, for a lack of a better term, bullshit science and, alternative treatments, of which I'll challenge you on some of them. And I want to have a conversation because I do believe in some of the ones that you call gray areas, according to your book, which is fantastic. Just fed it. But take me through the genesis of what made you want to start this. Was this a revenge play? What was it?
Well, so psychologists have a code of ethics, and so one of our code of ethics is having a responsibility to society, which basically means promoting and practicing evidence-based care. The converse, or the opposite of that, is also correcting misinformation in the public, and that's to protect the public. And so I consider that, all that to say, I consider that part of my ethical duty. And so my ethical and professional duty, and so I actually started going online to correct misinformation about the nature of cannabis addiction. Because you take an oath, right? Is it a Hippocratic oath? Do psychiatrists take the same oath? It's a code of ethics that you
sign and agree to, evidence-based treatments.
It's called an aspirational code of ethics, but then we also have what's called the legal standards of practice, and that's what we're legally obligated to. So our licensing bodies and our regulatory bodies make sure that we're following evidence-based practice, because if we don't, we can get into trouble. So there's ethics, and then there's actual legal standards of practice. And so I guess I started doing work on the nature of cannabis addiction because that was my dissertation work. So I would write articles for CBC and Scientific American, just trying to bust myths around cannabis, because I would treat a lot of patients who came to us with a cannabis addiction, and what they would say is, well, people are telling them, hey man, it's just it's just grass, it's not addictive, it's not a drug, it's just natural. And it's true that the vast majority of people who use cannabis won't develop an addiction, just like the vast majority of people who will use alcohol won't develop an addiction. But there's a big minority of people who do happen to develop an addiction. Those are the folks who end up at addiction treatment centers. They're the ones who I would see. And so I went online just trying to help battle some of the myths around that, the nature of that addiction, how it's different than alcohol addiction, how it's different than opioid addiction, but it has its own kind of downside to it. So I started off online on that. Then I got online and I was like, holy shit, it's not just cannabis addiction, or cannabis myths, obviously. It's just misinformation everywhere. So then it just sort of got me interested in debunking mental health misinformation more generally. And people would email me all the time, DM me all the time, asking me like, Jonathan, is this treatment legitimate? Is this guy a quack? Is this article legitimate? And so doing that for about 5 years, and I've learned so much along the way. Like you said, I just wanted to compile all that information into this book to try to help people understand how to answer these questions for themselves, to help really just empower people and embolden people to take their mental health into their own hands so that they can just be more skeptical with claims that they see on the online world, because you're going to get Instagram influencers, wellness grifters, people selling you a bill of goods, so to speak, or pseudoscientific treatments with no training and no background. And that's concerning to me, because I think that's financially and emotionally exploitive for people, especially people who experience mental disorders like depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh, I'm really grateful to be talking to you about this today, because we have a couple of like legitimate current issues, right? Current issues when it comes to pseudoscience, or pseudoscience where science might meet a religious core belief, happening in your province right now. With Alberta Health Sciences, right? Where we talk about pseudo treatments like ivermectin, which is an anti-parasitic, which was a big funny deal during the pandemic, something that I watched you battle. Well, you've got a premier in your province who was an ivermectin fan, if you will, and has effectively said that she's going to remove evidence-based running of hospitals in the province of Alberta, if I'm not mistaken. And feel free to clear me up and feel free to tell me I'm wrong where I'm wrong, or provide clarity. But in favor of the core beliefs of different church groups, whether it be Catholics, whether it be a different third-party group like Covenant Health, to take over evidence-based treatment in hospitals and how they are run in favor of core belief-based treatments, or as I would term it in some cases, pseudoscience. Does that, like that, and that's a rocket ship going through the news of Canada right now. Like it is a major, major, major sign to a lot of different people in your profession in the province that you practice medicine in, that the pseudoscience is becoming mainstream.
Yeah, that's fair, and I find that concerning. I
No
find
shit.
That's my understatement.
Yeah, tell me how you feel about it, dude. Like, I've watched you be a warrior for evidence-based science. I've watched you fight the grifters, religion, where it tries to play a part in telling people to stay sick because it's their job or whatever, for whatever reason, any core belief system of any faith, doesn't matter what it is. But I mean, you're not just battling grifters and wellness, right? Like let's dig into that, and then we'll make our way through the book and what pseudoscience really is, because like I want your thoughts.
Like you said, I'm fighting ideology. I'm fighting narrative, and fighting how science has become politicized. And I find that it's extremely dangerous. One of the case, and I make this case in the book,